Breaking tonight, Congress subpoenas Karl Rove to testify. The official document reads, and I quote, "By authority of the House of Representatives of the Congress of the United States of America to Mr. Karl Rove, you are hereby commanded to be and appear before the Committee on the Judiciary, and you are not to depart without leave of said committee." The committee demanding answers from Rove about whether he played a role in the prosecution of the former governor of Alabama, Democrat Don Siegelman, sentenced to 7 years last summer for corruption. As you see, he's with us. Rove's lawyer, Robert Luskin, had told us Rove would testify if subpoenaed, and the committee cited that assertion in its letter to Luskin today. But now, Rove, his attorney, and the White House appear to be saying something very different. His lawyer has cited executive privilege and said the White House would have to make the decision. And just hours ago, the White House made it pretty clear they have no interest in having Rove testify, saying, quote, "They know he can't answer, but they want political theater. Can't answer or won't answer." Committee Chair John Conyers has threatened to have Rove held in contempt and arrested if he refuses. So is that where this is heading, the arrest of Karl Rove? Joining me now is Governor Don Siegelman, investigative correspondent for Newsweek magazine, Michael Isikoff, and law professor Stan Goldman from Loyola Law School. All right, Stan, let's talk law here for a minute. It is pretty clear the White House is saying we don't want Rove to testify. Rove's lawyer is making it pretty clear he doesn't want Rove to testify. And yet Congress is subpoenaing him, saying legally you must testify. So what happens?
Well, the typical thing that would happen is if he doesn't come, they'd inform the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office would typically bring a contempt citation in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. The Justice Department, basically, by way of the President of the United States, has already informed us they don't appear to be particularly interested in bringing that action. So the Democrats will probably first try to go to court, force the Republican administration, the executive branch, to bring these charges against him of contempt if he doesn't show up. The question is, what happens if the court agrees that the executive branch doesn't have to do what Congress wants if they don't want to?
But Stan,
and that's going to be the interesting question.
Stan, there's something called inherent contempt. All right, and let me read from that. Under the inherent contempt power, the individual is brought before the House or the Senate by the sergeant at arms, tried at the bar of the body, and can be imprisoned in the Capitol jail. Now, John Conyers, look, I don't know if he was saying it off the cuff, but he has threatened to go and have Rove arrested. They could do that beyond the Department of Justice, right?
Well, you know, nobody's done this for almost 3/4 of a century, but I checked it out. 85 times in our history, this inherent contempt power was used. But after about 1935 or so, they decided they sort of didn't need it anymore because they had subpoena power that could be enforced by way of criminal or civil contempt in the courts. Now, if the administration is telling the Congress that you no longer have this power when it comes to anybody who ever worked for the executive branch, then it may very well be that Congress might at least think about the idea of exercising its inherent contempt powers, which means it literally sends the sergeant of arms out to find Karl Rove, arrest him, and bring him in to be tried. Now, the reason why they stopped doing it after about 1935 was also typically they try these things in front of the full House. In other words, the House basically has to shut down its business while they're trying them. But I don't read any reason why they have to do that. As I read the law, I think they can just try him in front of a committee and then have the committee's findings sent to the full Congress, and then the Congress make a decision as to whether he in fact will be held in contempt. And theoretically, you're right, he could be locked up in the basement of the Congress until this term of Congress is over come January.
Michael Isikoff, look, before we get to the broader question about the political prosecutions, etc., let me just get a sense from you. How angry do you sense that the Democrats are on Capitol Hill about this?
They're pretty angry. I mean, Conyers is certainly some of the Democrats in the Judiciary Committee, but it's quite a leap from there to imagine that anything like use of this inherent contempt power is going to be used. Remember, they've already subpoenaed former White House officials. Harriet Miers was subpoenaed in the U.S. Attorney investigation. The White House refused. The House took the White House to court. It's now tied up in the courts.
There's something different here. There's something different here, and that is that Karl Rove has said he had no conversations with the White House about the Siegelman case.
Right.
So let me go back to Professor Goldman. Doesn't that make a claim of executive privilege? I mean, executive privilege in theory is supposed to say to protect the conversations that the closest White House advisors have with the president. Karl Rove and his lawyer have both said there's no ambiguity in the terms they've used that Karl Rove did not speak with the White House about it. So what is the executive privilege claim?
Well, it's a pretty tough executive privilege claim if you take Karl Rove at his word. I mean, preliminarily, he's basically said, no, there were no conversations here, therefore there's no executive privilege. On the other hand, in many ways, what the administration, although they're saying executive privilege, may really be arguing is separation of powers. He belongs to me. The Justice Department belongs to me. Congress, you can't order us to do anything about one of our people. And in fact, we're just going to say no. If you want to enforce this contempt, don't go through the executive branch's Justice Department. Do it yourself. And I think that's a pretty big step for Congress to take. They may be willing to do it.